I'm Steve. Welcome back to the Wedding Photo Hangover podcast, the finest phototainment in the world. We are an irreverent look at photography. This podcast, like aspirin, will help you recover from your wedding hangover. This week, we have Casey Fatchett here to help aid you with your recovery. Casey is a photographer from New York, the New York area, right?
Correct. That's correct. New York City,
Yeah.
New Jersey area.
And Casey also runs an excellent website and podcast called The Nerdy Photographer, which all of you should check out, but we'll give links and stuff about that later. Casey, thanks so much for joining me today. How are you doing?
Thanks, Steve. I'm jazzed to be on the show. I'm excited. I've got some scotch. I've got some beer. I am prepped and ready to have a little fun.
Scotch and beer. That's what I love to hear. Just ready to go.
Yeah, I figured I gotta, chin chin, clink. Yeah, I mean, it's. I feel like when you do the intro, it takes me back to my Midwestern roots.
Yeah,
To Saturday. Just
that's
like
the
I was
vibe I'm
trying
going
not
for.
to laugh through. Yeah, there's a monster truck rally happening this weekend.
Oh yeah,
Be there.
I got my start doing video production, and I actually had to cut together those Saturday Monster Truck Rally commercials when I first got started working at like a small cable television ad place. And yeah, that was great. We had like a little audio recording booth that was literally inside my office, and I would send our voiceover guy in there, and he'd be in like this tiny little booth, just like Saturday. And I'm like right outside, and it's just like still really loud, even though the booth's supposed to be soundproof. And you're just like, oh gosh, I'm going to have to edit
Just
this later.
doing that voice, man. Like I used to do that voice. I used to do a lot of voiceovers
Mhm.
for commercials and
But
things.
you
Like
have a
just
great
as
voice. That makes sense.
well, as do you, as do you. Um, but I started out as an actor, so
Hmm.
that's why I moved to New York from the Midwest, was to do acting. And yeah, I did a lot of voiceovers, and that voice, like that, just being able to have that like announcer voice, hey everybody, what's going on, was like came in like not a lot of people can do that well. They can't do it
Hmm.
well, so that comes in handy.
For a while, I worked at a company where I was like doing video and audio production for them, but like their main thing was installing AV systems at national parks. So like when you go to a national
Hmm,
park, all the
yeah.
TVs, stereos, computer interface, like things that you see there, they would do. And part of my job for them was to write audio commentary for people who were visually impaired, so they could also
Wow.
experience the videos and stuff. And we would bring in at this job a magician from Fort Wayne, Indiana, to do all the voiceover. And he just had like the perfect voice, just like, just like that. But it was
It's a
the
magician voice.
worst voice ever for audio commentary. But he was like a friend of my
Yeah,
boss, so we just kept bringing him back, and it just every time just cracked me up because it's like you just feel like he's about to do magic at
he
every
is about to
moment.
do magic. It's yeah, he is about to do magic. Wow, like that just makes me think of like I've known some magicians, and just like thinking like yeah, like when you're doing audio commentary at a museum or a national park or something like that, you don't want the guy who's like doing the prestige in front of you at the
Yes. Yeah, he did like voiceover work for other people too, and he could do his like magician's act was more of a comedy routine, so he could like throw
okay,
stuff in, just like imitating other like things. So every once in a while we'd be recording, and he'd just start like doing Quagmire from Family Guy, like giggity
mm,
giggity like stuff, and he like just perfect like Quagmire voice, just like sounded exactly like I was watching the TV
giggity
show.
giggity,
Yeah.
yeah, oh yeah, it's impressions are another one of my things. So like, yeah, we'll get
Yeah.
into that later. I guess
Oh
that's
man,
part
that's
of
awesome.
my podcast. Yeah, yeah. It's I just got done recording another podcast with commentary on the movie Highlander, and it
Hmm.
was just me doing the voices from the movie Highlander, pretty much. Like as they're like, I was like, "Are you guys getting bored of me like just doing all of the Sean Connery stuff and just be like, you have the brains of a goat and you smell like a donkey."
That is
Like
fantastic.
you
That's
guys,
really good.
and they're and they're like, no, we love it when people come on and do voices. So yeah, I was just sort of in my element doing that. Like, yeah, impressions are. That's something I've done since I was a kid. It was,
Oh, that's awesome.
it's been a long road, Stephen. It's in it's been
If
when I was
people
growing up.
want to get
Go
more of
ahead.
that Sean Connery accent, what was the podcast you were on?
It's called Four Nerds by Nerds.
Hmm.
It's the Four Nerds by Nerds podcast. Just search for it wherever you get podcasts and look for the Highlander episode. I also did an episode with them doing commentary on the movie Galaxy Quest. So yeah, those are two episodes there I've been on. Probably be on more later. So yeah, go check it out.
Oh,
It's
that
fun.
sounds awesome.
Yeah, but like doing impressions has always been something like mimicking people was always something that I was always very good at and enjoyed doing. Because I wanted to be a stand-up comedian when I was a kid. I wanted to be Johnny Carson. I wanted to host
That's
the Tonight
awesome.
Show. Yeah, it's and then it's awesome until you get like it becomes a business. It's sort of like something we'll talk about probably with as far as photography. Like when you get into the business side of it,
Hmm.
it gets it sort of drains you a little bit. Like the I got out of acting because I was up for two really big parts, and both of the reasons I didn't get one was the movie Vanilla Sky with Tom Cruise.
Hmm.
I don't know if you're familiar with this film.
You were gonna play Tom Cruise's role in Vanilla Sky.
No, I was gonna play the guy in the blue suit who like shows
Mhm.
up throughout the movie
Yeah. Okay.
and then explains everything at the end, like
Yeah.
does the whole reveal at the end as far as what's going on. I went in and read for that part 8 times, which is a lot. It's a
Hmm.
lot of times. At that point, you're like, "Where's Cameron Crowe? Where am I testing with Tom Cruise? When's he going to be in here?" And I've met Tom Cruise on another occasion. I met Tom Cruise, um, but then they looked at me and they were like, "We love you, Casey. We love the way you read this. We love you know your take on the character. You're just too tall."
Too tall.
Because every scene I would be in would be with Tom Cruise, and I'm 6 feet tall, and he's 5'5", and he demands in his rider that he be as tall, look as tall as the person in the frame with him. So if you go and watch any movie with Tom Cruise, like look at like he looks like he's as tall as anybody else, and they go through a lot of camera tricks to make that happen. But I was like, my height is on my resume. You knew this before you brought me in. You knew this every time I came. I didn't get shorter as I came in. Like I wasn't getting like an inch shorter every time I came into this room to read this part. But the other one was the not Honey Nut Cheerios bee. I was up for that as well. But then the Geico Gecko.
Hmm.
They switched the Geico Gecko out to a different person when it first started out. It was this very English sounding guy, and then there was his contract was up, and they kept saying we want somebody to sound exactly like him. And like I said, I'm a good mimic. I went in and did it. Like, and I was like, "Do you want me to try something else?" And they were like, "No, that was perfect." Same thing, brought in like several times. And then finally, it's like me and two other guys. And the other guy's going, I don't know why they keep bringing me in. All I do is the same voice every time I come in. The guy's looking at us and goes, I don't know why they keep bringing me in. I can't do an English accent. And that's the guy who got the part because they're like, he just blew us away with something totally different. And there's like actually an episode, or not episode, a commercial with the gecko that actually has that guy. It's the one where the gecko's walking down like a boardroom table and they
I
gets
know
to
exactly. Yeah.
And the guy goes, "If I was little and green and spoke with an English accent, everybody'd love me too. Pip pip cheerio." And it's like he's got this horrible English accent. That's actually the guy who does the voice of the gecko. Um, and this woman looks at the gecko and goes, "You're English? I thought you were Australian." Because the accent doesn't make sense. It's not either. It's really muddy. And that's when the gecko goes, "Yeah, funny story." Because it's like he couldn't do one or the other. It was like something that's very muddy. But like that's what got the gig. That's what nailed him the job. So yeah, at that point I was just like, this is way too subjective for me. I can't deal with it.
So then you started doing more photography because that's not subjective.
Yeah, I mean, I went from one really subjective job to another, and it's funny that you asked that, Stephen, because people say to me, "So you thought that photography would be easier?" Well, it's sort of on my own terms. I think
Hmm.
is what I agree. I laugh at it too. I'm like, yeah, yeah. And I was just talking to somebody the other day about how I went to a very prestigious business school in the Midwest, which I will not mention because I hate their politics. But my mom was always like, why didn't you go take any business classes? And I'm like, when am I ever going to need business classes? and you need them whatever job that you do. If you're an actor or you're
Hmm.
a photographer, you need to sell yourself in certain ways. Uh, but I'd never looked at it that way, which was maybe why it could have been easier if I had thought about, hey, this is whether you're you know acting or being a photographer, you are running a business of yourself. You're marketing, you're doing all these things, you wear a lot of hats. But I was ready for that because as an actor, like I was used to selling myself, but I didn't really think of it that way. And I didn't really think of how there were a lot of marketing skills that I learned being an actor, just like networking and all those sorts of things that I knew, but then I just
Hmm.
sort of like translated it immediately into photography. I got started as a photographer taking headshots for other actors.
Okay, yeah.
Because I was into photography before that, but like I got to New York and like everybody needs a headshot and they need a headshot updated fairly regularly. And I was shooting film back then. I'm a dinosaur. The T Rex is like coming out of Jurassic Park right now. Um, but people needed a headshot, so I was shooting headshots, and I was shooting like band promo photos, and then I was like shooting live band uh, shows, which was like, you want to talk about trial by fire, shooting film, a band performing live, like the lighting changes like instantly, and you're just sort of freaking out, like, oh my god, what, like you learn the exposure triangle super fast,
Hmm.
because I would take two film camera bodies with me, and because you couldn't change film speeds, like I'd had one film speed in one camera and another in the other, and I'd just sort of adjust like really quickly, like make my manual adjustments like really fast. Um, so yeah, and then like my friends from college started getting married, and I was doing like I would go to their weddings and take some pictures, and people would be like, "This is better than the guy we hired." So then I was like, yeah, this sounds like a good idea. I could make a lot of money doing this sort of stuff. It's only on the weekends. Yeah, I was young and stupid, and thought that I would only be like really working on the weekends doing weddings. Had no idea what I was getting into. Went out and did my first wedding, and I totally fell in love with it. Just like the emotional aspects of it, and
Hmm.
just the joy and the fun of it. I mean, there's been doing this for 20 years. It's not always joy and fun, but I mean, there's a lot of it out there, and I just sort of fell in love with it, and that's when I when I decided I was going to get out of acting. I had been doing weddings for a few years, but I really hadn't been like sort of like I'm full on doing weddings, and this is gonna be my job. So when I decided like acting was done, you know, or taking a back seat. I still did voiceovers for a while after that. I just was like, all right, let's plow. Like weddings is going to be where it's at because it was a the thing that I enjoyed doing the most, and b it was also the thing that made the most money. Because actors are terrible. Um, they flake all the time on headshot shoots, and they're like, "Oh, I was supposed to pay you. I'm sorry, I forgot." So yeah, weddings were where it was at for me. Made that switch.
And are you just doing primarily weddings now still, or you branching out into any other areas of photography?
I do like right now. Most of my business is weddings. I'm right now looking at like I've done commercial work. I do corporate events. I do corporate headshots. Um, and I'm right now like getting into because the pandemic has forced us all to sort of take a step back and reevaluate things. And um, what's the term? Revenue streams.
Hmm.
I think that's a important thing to think about. And like finding other things. I've been doing a lot of like local business branding photos, and in my community where I live in New Jersey now, um, and corporate stuff. And also, I did a big project for the VA last year, which is really helped me because weddings were sort of done out here. Um, I did a big project for them, like helping out vets and like this whole
Hmm.
project to like help vets live a better life. And I was like, yeah, it's a good cause, and also they paid well, so that was good. Yeah, I love weddings. I mean, weddings are like sort of like the thing that I enjoy doing the most. But yeah, I do other stuff.
Hmm. Oh, that's awesome. It's really cool that you're able to differentiate over this like last year, especially with like the VA work and everything like that. Has that been a difficult transition to do more of that kind of stuff, or Has it been kind of like just a new area in the same like
I don't
expertise
know,
for
because
you?
I mean, like how to explain it in a way that the listeners will understand. Like I got into photography as a generalist sort of photographer. Like I didn't have a lot of formal training. I had taken like
Hmm.
one class in college on 35 millimeter film, and like that was pretty basic. It wasn't like people were I took I was a journalism and act like theater major were my two majors with minors in physics and Spanish and math. It's very bizarre. Um, that yeah, when I got into photography in New York, I was doing so many different things because, like, while I said I was doing headshots and bands, like I still continue to do that stuff. Even when I got into weddings, I was like, yeah, I'm not going to turn things down. It was
Yeah.
just that I wasn't marketing myself so much as that photographer. So I would do like corporate headshots. I would do fashion work when it came up, or like product stuff when people were like, "Can you do this?" And I'm like, "Are you going to pay me?" Sure, yeah, like I can do that. And I would just teach myself like how to do that type of photography. Like that was just like I learned photography from trial and error and from reading books about whatever that type of photography was. Like like product stuff, still lifes. I would just like go and get a book and then like, okay, we're going to do this. All right, this is what lighting equipment I need. This is what I need to have. I talked to other photographers I knew who did that specifically and just like learn. I mean, I think that is. I mean, maybe I'm old man yells at cloud, but I feel like there's not a lot of that anymore. That people just want somebody to tell them what the settings they should use, and I'm not that kind of guy. I just, yeah. Go
Gosh,
ahead.
that triggers me so much because every time I get on Facebook, there's somebody who's like, "What settings
Oh
should I
yeah.
use for a wedding?" And it's like, you
Uh huh.
change the settings all throughout the day. Like, if
Oh
you're
yeah.
asking what settings I should use, maybe just put it in like auto.
Exactly. And it's like, yeah, I'll see somebody like one of my favorites was somebody's like, I've got a wedding in a church. What settings should I use? And I was just like, there's so much going on here that I can't even begin. I can't even begin to tell you what you might. I was just like, "Just put it on aperture priority mode." I don't know, like what to tell you. Like that's, I don't know. Do they allow flash in the church? Do like what equipment do you have? Like, there's a lot of variables here. Like I was a math guy. Like I cannot solve this problem. I don't have any constants, going on that I can solve off of. Um, yeah, so like that is something that bugs me, and it's just because I was always under the impression that you have to figure it out. Like it's like that's just like situations are always changing, and that was I think something again like the live show like with bands like because the lighting would always be changing like every 20 seconds if not faster. Like you just had to adjust, you had to figure it out. Nobody's going to tell you. And I shoot a combination of manual like most of the time, and then I'll shoot aperture priority if people are going to be like moving a lot
Hmm.
outside, because like the light might change. Like if I can't have like a any sort of control over the light, like I might shoot aperture priority because I know kind of where I want to be, but like a cloud could come over and
Yeah,
and it suddenly gets very dark or something happens. Like I use that. Like so, yeah. I don't. I think there's a lot of just tell me how to do it going on, and you know I'm always like, yeah, but that might not work depending on your scenario.
I
I
feel
want
like
people to have the
yeah,
go ahead.
if you come to it and your mindset is I want to run a business, not I want to run a photography business or I want to be a photographer, it would be a lot easier to fall into the tell me the settings I need to use as opposed to maybe I'm going to figure this out on my own or experiment. But that might be short shrifting
Yeah.
people who are more business minded because a lot of them want to figure stuff
Mm,
out too.
yeah, I think that's sort of. I think like again, I might be dating myself, and not in a romantic way, but in a chronological way. Um, but it's sort of this like it's a cultural shift in generational shift, I guess. That I
Hmm.
see a lot more lately, where people are just sort of like, "Oh, I really want to take a picture like that. What gear did you use? what settings did you use?
Mhm.
Instead of being like, okay, like, yeah, gear kind of matters, but what is it about the photo that you really like? And this is part of the reason that I started the Nerdy Photographer,
Mhm.
was because I saw sort of a lack in the industry of people talking about like the basics of technical photography. Like, I am not the world's best technical photographer, but I'm a photography nerd. And that, I mean, that's kind of where this came from, where like Nerdy Photographer came from, was out of this sort of seeing like a vacuum of people like really talking about like, okay, what does the exposure triangle actually mean? And why is it important for you to really understand it? And what are each of these things? Because like people would just be like, oh, I want to get the the widest aperture lens I can get because I want that bokeh. Um, Got to get those bokeh photos. Um, and like crank it to ISO 24,000 because I don't want to learn how to use a flash, or I'm afraid of learning how to use a flash. And there should not be fear. Like, I didn't know anything about flash when I started out. And I of course sucked at times. Like my flash work was not always the best, but like like there's a certain amount of just trial and error. Like, if you're willing to put in some time, and like if this is going to be your craft, it's going to be your business, take some time and practice and figure out how to do this shit. Like, it's like, come on, like, it's not like I walk into a business office and be like, what, I'm gonna be I'm gonna be the head marketing officer of this company, but I ain't gonna sit down and learn anything about marketing. Just tell me how this stuff works. Just give me the settings that I need to make this Fortune 500 company marketing work. I don't I'm not gonna sit down and learn nothing. um,
Do they
but
give
yeah,
jobs to people like that?
no,
How do I get one of
I've tried.
those?
I've tried. Trust me, I've been on LinkedIn. People wonder what LinkedIn is on for anymore. It's for me just sending out resumes for jobs I'm totally unqualified for. And I'm like, hey, I can learn this. I'm a quick learner. I can pick stuff up pretty fast. Um, what's this job requirements? 5 years experience? Nah, I don't need that. I don't need that 5 years. I need 2 hours. You tell me how to log into the computers. I got that.
Just point me to the Google search and I'll be good. Don't worry about it.
Oh, that's a line that I actually use a lot. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Confessions of a Shopaholic
No, I've
with
not.
Isla Fisher. Um, Isla Fisher and Hugh Dancy, who's on Hannibal and a
Mhm.
bunch of other things. But anyway, like her character is totally unqualified for what she's doing and the job that she's gotten, which she's using to pay off a huge, enormous amount of credit card debt. And her boss literally asks her to do something, and she types it into Google. And he looks at her and he goes, "Did you just Google how to do what I told you?" She's like, "Yes, I Googled." And I'm like, yeah, I use that for my wife all the time. She's like, "Did you just do the thing that I am?" Like, yeah, yeah, I Googled the thing you told me not to do. Yeah, I did that. I did that. But yeah, I will often like send out like just for fun, like LinkedIn, like submissions for jobs that I'm totally unqualified for. Gotta stay, gotta stay in the loop. You gotta like let people know I'm available. I'm out there. Keep my name in the
Yeah.
forefront of their minds.
If you don't get enough rejections, you don't stay at the top of people's minds. That's how it works.
Exactly, and a lot of if you don't hear the word no enough, you're not trying. And this is actually this is a helpful bit of advice for if you're sifting for the gold in this conversation. This is actually one of the hidden gems. You should be looking for potential clients to say no to you in meetings more often than you probably are, because when somebody says no to you, they're actually being honest. And too often your potential clients are going to yes you to death.
Mhm.
So look for things where they'll say no. Make them say no to you, because then they're at least thinking. So that's my tidbit of the day. Cheers. I'm having another drink.
It's better to get a little bit of pushback and have somebody say, like, actually, I don't like this one thing you said, and then still end up booking you because, like,
Exactly.
showing they were paying attention, they're cognizant. The worst is when you get somebody who's like, yes, 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 yes. After the meeting, they just ghost you, and it's
and
just
you
like,
never hear from them.
yeah, because you don't get any valuable
Okay,
feedback
we're
from
gonna
that
get
about
into
like what you did right or wrong in the meeting or what clicked with them or didn't.
exactly, exactly. Okay, so I'm gonna keep it quick. Um, First thing I always say to people, because I'm a very like candid type of guy as far as weddings go. So the first thing I ask people after I say, well, I'll say, "What about my work did you like that made you contact me?" And then the second thing I'll say after that, if they tell me, because once they tell me that, I kind of go like, "Oh, now I know what they're into,
Mhm,
and what about me they like, and so I can riff off of that for this meeting and like focus on those things." And the second thing I'll say, like, "So do you want a lot of posed portraits?" Because
mhm,
I don't do like I do a lot of my specialty is like more candid moments and things like that. Like I'll do you know pose photos, but um, most of my clients don't like to do a lot of those. So it immediately
mhm.
sets them in a spot like no, like they're like no, I don't want to do a lot, and I'm like yes, great, fantastic. That is not what I'd like to focus on either. But then the thing is, before I end the meeting, and is always say like because usually we end meetings with like pricing photographers is kind of dumb. It's kind of the worst place to end a meeting, but like you've talked to them and then he's go like, here are my prices. And then sort of like, hey, oh yes, great. Yeah. And then they leave and you never hear from them again. Um, but I always try to end with is, so do you want to move forward right now?
Mhm,
And if they say yes, great, booked, done, in the books. And if they say no, then you get the opportunity to ask them why not.
mhm.
So once they ask you why not, then you again, they're giving you the pearls here, like as Foghorn Leghorns used to say, "I'm giving you pearls, son. I'm giving you pearls." Like they're giving you the information that you need to book that job. So I mean, I'm sorry, I'm getting way too like business oriented for this podcast. This is not like we're
No, I love it. I mean, Foghorn Leghorn was my dad's favorite from Looney Tunes, so, hearing somebody
Marvin
else
the Martian
appreciate
was my
him was, great. Marvin the Martian?
yeah, he was my favorite, his personal
I heard he's
favorite,
not gonna be in
Marvin.
the new, Space Jam, right?
Makes no sense. How do you have Space Jam without the one space character that you had in Looney Tunes? Like, come on, for God's sake,
I mean, the first one made sense, he was the
Marvin the Martian.
referee, so
Yeah, I mean, because he's an alien. Like, come on. My other favorite was what was his name? He was basically the monster, the big hair monster. Do you remember the big hair monster from Looney
yes.
Tunes?
Mhm.
Like, monsters are the most interesting peoples. Um, that and Dracula, the vampire bat. He's like, abracadabra, I am a bat. Um, abracadabra, I'm an umpire. Um, yeah, so segue. Sorry.
Yeah. No, a few times I've seen you taking a drink, what are you drinking scotch-wise?
This is Balvenie 12.
Oh, wow.
Balvenie 12 Scotch. Um, I learned a while ago that I love Scotch. Scotchy Scotch in my belly. Um, but I have Scottish heritage, and I don't like cheap Scotch. So I don't drink a lot, but it's sort of like if I'm going to drink something, it's got to be something of quality. Like, I'm not a 12 pack of Miller Lite kind of guy. I'm, two or three good beers and a nice glass of scotch. Um, which I feel like if that's what you go with, like then you end up, spending the same amount of money or close to actually, if you really think about it.
Yeah.
Quality over quantity. It's the same as my photography, motto, if you will. And the beer is, for those of you who are watching on video on YouTube, is Belhaven Wee Heavy, which
Oh,
is
nice.
a Scottish. It's called a rich Scottish ale. I discovered this beer in New York City about 20 years ago. A friend of mine was working at a place called the Ginger Man Bar, which had 70 different beers on tap at that point in the in the early 2000s, which was a lot of beers at that point in time,
Yeah.
because now you seem to have like it's become a more of a prevalent thing in recent years. But she was the bartender. She's a friend of mine from college. She said, like, you're gonna like this beer. And I was like, why? And she's like, it's like Guinness but not bitter. And I was like, all right, I like Guinness anyway, but I'll try it. And she was exactly right. It's called a rich Scottish ale, but I like refer to it's like teetering on stout territory,
Hmm.
which is why they call it a wee heavy. It's actually actually a genre. I don't know what they call it, oeuvre of beers. In
I was
Scotland
drinking
is called a
a
wee.
Einstock Wee Heavy like 2 days
Yeah,
ago. I love Wee Heavies. They're real good.
yeah, yeah. It's like almost a stout, but not quite. And it's just like this stuff is tasty if you can get it.
Mm.
Mm, mm, mm,
And they
mm.
usually have like a like pretty like full taste with like some notes of like being higher in alcohol by volume.
Oh yeah, I have traveled to Scotland, and when I was there, there's another. There are several Scottish beers that I really really enjoy. McEwen's is another one, and we went into a pub called the Drunken Barrister, in which is like the drunk lawyer,
Hmm.
which is right next to the courthouse in Edinburgh, and it's down in a little what's called a close, which is one of those like really tight little walkways like between buildings, and you get down to this little plaza sort of thing, and there's this bar, and I walked in, and they had McEwen's on draft, and they had McEwen's 70 and McEwen's 80. You'll notice that this Belhaven, if for those who are watching on video, says Belhaven 90. So I was like, oh, what's the difference between 70 and 80? And the guy goes, well, it's actually, the price per, like in shillings per barrel. And I was like, okay, so what determines the price in shillings per barrel? And he goes, alcohol content. And I was like, I'll take the 80. Yeah, I'll have the higher alcohol content one. Sounds good to me. So yeah, that's how. If you go to Scotland, you'll find that they have their own. The numbers mean how much alcohol is in there.
The numbers are good. It sounds like
Yeah, higher
high
numbers are
numbers.
good. I have a friend who's a Belgian beer distributor.
Oh,
Works for
nice.
Belgian, and like there was like there was a bachelor weekend. It was three friends of ours, like, and he was one of them. We're all getting married in the same summer, so they had like we're not gonna like make everybody go to a different bachelor party or whatever, since it was the same circle of friends, and they were like, we're gonna have a bachelor weekend for the three of us. Um, so he brought like cases and cases and cases of Belgian beer, and people were like waking up at like 10 a.m. and drinking Belgian beer. I was like, hey, you guys need to pace yourselves.
What?
This is a bad idea. And people would just be passed out by 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I was just like,
Yeah.
you're drinking like 13 ABV beers.
Uh, it's cool. We're gonna start with a Chimay Grand Cru. We're gonna switch over from there to a Delirium Tremens. Then we're gonna go to a Golden Drac. It's gonna be a
Yeah,
great
that
day.
Drock was the company that he worked for at that point in
Oh,
time.
awesome.
He was the Drock distributor. So yeah, it was like cases of Golden Drock,
Oh
and I
my
was just like,
gosh.
people were
That
just like,
sounds
"Yeah, this is great." And I'm like, "No, no, you guys need some like Miller High Life to start the day with. Like, save that stuff for the end of like the nighttime, like after dinner drinking. No, always a reason
yeah.
to
I mean,
not
it's
listen
great
to.
though if you pass out at 2 in the afternoon, then when you wake up around 4 in the afternoon, you have a hangover for the rest of the day.
Yeah, there's a lot from that weekend I don't want to remember. And don't remember honestly, but yeah, it's one of those things that you need. Speaking of wedding hangovers, there was thankfully this was so well in advance of any of their weddings that like nobody had to like worry about doing anything the next day other than going paintballing, which was a bunch of hungover dudes paintballing is always great. Don't aim for the face. That's all I gotta say. Paintball, don't aim for the face.
I've only gone paintballing once and I got shot in the face. I was wearing a
Yes.
mask and it went up underneath the mask and busted my lip open, and then I had
Oh
paint
yeah.
in my mouth. It's terrible.
It just sounds so painful. Yeah, I remember it was like when we went paintballing that week. I don't know. Maybe it's my violent Midwestern hair, like lifestyle heritage growing up, guns and things like that. Like it's just like it. I've been paintballing, whatever. Like that weekend, there was so many like East Coast people who had never really like been in like around guns or been hunting. Like I'd been hunting as a kid and like all sorts of things. Like there was just sort of this like I don't know. Even though you're trying to hit your friends paintballing, there was sort of like this trepidatious and like
Mhm.
I was blasting people. But then the one friend of mine just like like went total Terminator, which was bizarre. Like he just was like walking like straight up to people, like 10 feet away from them, just like popping them. Like people were like, he has lost his mind. He was really drunk, which was great.
He's just getting shot by hundreds of paintballs. Just walks right
He didn't
across.
know. Like seriously, he was like, it was seriously like something out of a movie. Like it was like the scene in Tombstone when Wyatt Earp, like at the river when he
Yeah.
goes after Curly Bill and he's like, no, and just like suddenly Wyatt Earp is like walking on water, as Val Kilmer says in that movie. Like, he's like just like going through like shooting everybody. Like he was just like walking straight at them and not getting
Wow.
hit by anybody, just like blasting everyone. It was crazy. It was really crazy.
That's right. I love having a conversation with someone where they can reference Tombstone. That's always a delight.
I'm in my prime. Um, that's one of my favorites. My favorite scene that is, I like to think of like lesser known scenes from famous movies, is
Mhm.
that Billy Bob Thornton is in that movie
Mhm.
at the beginning, and he's the faro dealer at that Wyatt Earp. Like he's like, go ahead, skin that smoke wagon, see what happens. Um, and then he's like gonna come and shoot Wyatt, like, with he's got the shotgun, like, and Doc is like, he's like, Johnny Madcap. Is yeah, so it's like those things that people don't think about, like, oh yeah, that's right, Billy Bob Thornton was in that movie. That's like, there's a ton of people in that movie. If you want to talk about, like, we are so far gone from the original like stream of this discussion, but like movies, like, but it kind of brings it back because like anybody who wants to talk about movies, but this is like totally a thing for me. Like,
Mhm.
I speak fluent movie quote. Um, And my wife likes to say, like, if you used some of that power that in your brain that holds all of the movie quotes and TV quotes and comic book references and things like that, like, for good, like you could accomplish such great things. Um, I'm like, yeah, but I don't want to push any of that stuff out of my brain.
I would argue you are using it for good.
I am.
So
I am.
to talk a little bit more about the comics, movies, all the references and stuff. One of the things you do on your podcast, the Nerdy Photographer, is you do like a I put can I call this an audio adventure series? And you changed the Google Doc to say I could. So I'm going to roll with that.
Yes.
You do an audio
Yeah.
adventure series that runs alongside the show and sometimes has like full episodes of the show just devoted entirely to it, where you play like is it a fictional version of yourself or is this just a version you're actually doing these adventures, you're just telling us
I,
about them later?
you know, if I, it's classified. Um, if I told you, I'd have to kill you. Like I might disappear from the planet for like certain long periods of time. You wouldn't know because I like, just work on the weekends because I'm a wedding photographer. Um, yeah, it's there's this like I got a review recently. It's sort of like I don't know, kind of as a podcast host, sort of like made me take a step back because it was like it's like this is like these there's this whole old time radio drama that he's doing that it's like Doctor Who meets Indiana Jones, and yeah, it just incorporates a lot of different things that I love. And
Mhm.
I got to episode 25 of my podcast and I was just like, you know what, I called this the Nerdy Photographer. I just wasn't being nerdy enough. Like there's like I was occasionally like doing impressions and uh, references to movies and comics and things like that. And then I was like, you know what? I need to go full nerd. Um, and I leaned into it and I created the crew of the Fibonacci, which is the sentient spaceship that is uh, that picked me up from Earth, and like we've
Mhm.
all we go on adventures. And so now, like every episode of the Nerdy Photographer podcast, well, pretty much every episode has a frame around it, which is this the adventures of the crew, and I throw in references to movies that I love, like the last couple episodes. I don't know when this is going to come out, but like last couple episodes that I've recorded or have released have references to 2001 and to both because Evil Dead Army of Darkness referenced uh, the Klaatu Verata Nikto,
Mhm.
and the Army of Darkness is a reference to the day the Earth stood still, because that was what controlled the robot Gort in their day the Earth stood still. But I like took it back, and like instead of you like the control words that controlled Fibonacci, the ship, were Klaatu Verata Noodle, which is one of the things that Bruce Campbell in
Yeah.
Army of Darkness says because he couldn't remember Nikto. So it's like, yeah, I'm doing both, but then I was also doing like Fibonacci, the ship, is also kind of like Hal from 2001. He's just sort of this emotionless character, but he, in my version, he's like this super sarcastic version of myself. He's just like, doesn't give, he doesn't care. He's just like so worn out by like the references and everything. And then the other character, I can go through the characters if you want, um, and what the inspiration behind each of them was, because they're all inspired by different photographic references.
Mhm.
So Fibonacci, of course, is the Fibonacci sequence, sort of like if you in rules of composition, the Fibonacci spiral. And then there's Golden Hour,
Yeah.
who is the snug warrior, and all he ever says is snug. He's sort of like a Fizzgig Snarf character, Snarf from Thundercats,
Yeah.
Fizzgig from Dark Crystal. Um, but he's a fierce warrior, and he's warm and inviting, just like the Golden Hour, because that's his name, Golden Hour. Then there's Rula 3RDS, who's the data robot. She can never be broken. We actually had a like adventure episode recently. We find out what happens when you break Rula 3RDS. And then uh, F 2.0, who's sharp but shallow. Um, and he's my like outlet for doing impressions and things like that. Like he literally communicates in either song lyrics or movie quotes. So it's just like, very shallow. There's not a lot of like thought on it, but it's like really quick with the reference. Yeah, so that's my nerdy photo crew. Yeah, I just like that's always been a part of me. Like I was when I was a kid, I was very into comics and movies, science fiction, fantasy, and those sorts of things. Dungeons and Dragons, role playing games of all sorts. Just enjoyed that stuff a lot. And so when
Mhm.
I created Nerdy Photographer, there was a part, like a friend who recently said to me, like, "Oh, I was really expecting Nerdy Photographer to be more like super technical." Like when I thought about that, like when I heard that name, I was like, "This is going to be like super technical." Then I started listening to the episodes, and I'm like, not only do you get into like technical like tips, like but like the nerd part of it is like super nerd stuff. Like this, just like out there, really nerdy stuff. I'm like, well, yeah, because I mean, like that's who I am, and I feel like, yeah, I don't know, like I don't apologize for it anymore.
I love it. I love the like recent thing you did with like the Raiders of the Lost Ark spoof sort of thing.
Yes.
And then oh gosh, there's one episode that had me like rolling with laughter. It was the one with the Crimson Cutlass.
Oh yes, the
And she started
Pirates of the Caribbean Nebula. Like
yeah, she
yeah,
started like
yeah,
naming off all of her nicknames, and the one that just
yes,
sent me into fits of laughter was she's like the Scarlet Gash, and you were like,
yes.
"Oh, I don't think I'd say that." And I was
I don't
just
think we can
I
say
had
that
to
here.
like almost pull over. I was laughing so hard.
Yeah, and it's yeah, it was the workshop, because like actually my friend Jen,
Mhm.
who plays Rula 3RDS and was the Crimson Cutlass, and I like literally sat down, like we're like, oh, what are we gonna call this character? Like we got on a call and we're just like discussing, and this is just how we talk.
Mhm.
So like that was literally our workshop call to like discuss what we were going to call the character. We came up with this list of like 50 different names, and we got to one like Vermilion Vengeance. I'm like, no, that's the ship.
Yeah.
That's what her ship is going to be called. Like we'll call it the ship. Like get to Crimson Cutlass, and I was like, oh yeah, that's pretty good because like at the end of that episode, we have the pitch meeting because we went back and re-recorded like the pitch
Yeah.
meeting where they're like workshopping and focus grouping, the names. Um, yeah, that's literally like just how she and I talk to one another.
Mhm. That's great, and I love, like, when you guys are talking, like, you can just tell that you guys are having fun, and that's I might be getting older, but, like, one of my favorite things with anything I watch now is, like, I wanna know the people creating it are enjoying creating it. Like, I don't wanna watch something where
Yeah.
people seem, like, upset to be there or anything.
Yeah, and I try to do that with like all of my interviews with anybody. I just like I want to have fun. I want to like there are a few times where we talked about like like very serious issues. Like there are times when I talked like racism and representation in the photography industry and
Mhm.
like grief because I dealt with the loss of my parents last year and just like
So
getting into like
sorry.
how that thank you. It's a journey, but it's like like getting into those topics like occasionally like it's a very special episode of the Nerdy Photographer. um and that's just kind of how I like look at that. Like there's occasionally you need to talk about the serious stuff, but you know it was another sort of another review that I got recently that made me chuckle. It was like, I never know what to expect. Like it could be serious discussion about race in the photography industry, or it could be this like crazy science fiction adventure, and it just like keeps me guessing as to what's coming. And I'm like, well, technically there is a pattern to it, but whatever. Like you can like I want you to be on your toes. Like like 99% of the time it's just entertainment. It is
Mhm.
like, and it's talking about things in the photo industry. Like I talk with people, I don't want to sit down and be like, so what's your favorite shot that you took? Like it's just sort of like like those sorts of things. I want to talk about things that like both for professional and like I've talked to like amateur photographers as well, like on a couple of episodes, just like, what is it about this photo that you took that you really love? Like, what is it? Like, find that love for
Mhm.
photography. Find out what is it that you love about this, or what makes you laugh about this industry. Like, people like we've been in this industry for a very long time, and there are a lot of people who take themselves super, super seriously, and it's sort of like, come on, guys, let's let the hot air out of the room a little bit. Like,
Yeah.
it's a wonderful thing that we're doing, like capturing these memories for people, especially in the wedding industry. But it's sort of like, like there's also like, come on, you're not curing cancer. Like there's a space in here in between, like how seriously you should be taking yourself. Yeah,
Yeah. No, I love it, man. Uh, Thank you for talking to me about all that stuff. Do you wanna answer some weird questions from Facebook with me?
absolutely. I don't know if I can swear on this podcast.
You can.
I would fucking love to do that. Yeah. Oh, there is a question. Like, there is one thing I wanted to get before we do that. Like, you had
Yeah.
asked in your Google document asking questions. Like, what have I
Oh,
done with the
yes.
Heiland
Yeah.
3 cell flash? I'm
Oh.
leaving it as it is. I am not converting it into a lightsaber, at least not now. Anyone who watches the animated episodes of the Nerdy Photographer, or yeah, even the episode "The Pirates of the Caribbean," where we introduced the spaceship
Mhm.
drawings. Spaceships are all based on antique cameras
Mhm.
and photographic equipment, but I kept this Highland 3 cell flash, which is the anybody who knows anything about these, this is what they used for the lightsabers in Star Wars, in the original Star Wars, and you can convert them into a lightsaber. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to keep it as it is. This is actually the basis for the drawings of Fibonacci, the character, and the ship.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, let's answer some fucking questions from Facebook.
Let's do some Q&A.
But Steve.
So Morgan from a random Facebook group asks, they, them, Morgan says, I'm shooting a wedding for a couple where they got engaged during a game of D&D. One of them proposed and the other made them roll persuasion before answering
Mm.
yes. They're sticking with the theme, and when booking me, they made me do a charisma check while pitching them on using me, and they made me roll persuasion before agreeing to hire me. I rolled a nat 20 and they booked my highest package as a result. They are adamant about sticking with this during the wedding day and the portraits and everything. What do I do if I roll a critical failure during their portrait time? Do I stick with it and do a shitty job?
This is a difficult question. As a D&D nerd, I am. There's the part of me that like thinks that you like. Morgan, that is the icing on the cake. This is like keeping them in the mood. This is what keeps them in their mood. This is something they enjoy. Just because you roll a critical fail does not mean that you have to critically fail at your job. Can separate the two. This is what we like to call, in the psychology business, compartmentalization. Or in the acting business, which I was a part of for a very long time, acting. You pretend. It's called playing pretend. You can pretend like, oh, I rolled a 1, a natural 1. I'm, sad trombone. But no, Morgan, you should continue to do your job to the best of your ability. That's my advice.
I mean, I would go in, all dice, they're supposed to be perfectly balanced. None is, though. Every die has like it lands up on some number more than the rest. Get some weighted die, just go in there with a 20-sided die that's just like weighted, so you always roll 20s.
Doing some Ocean's 13 action. You got the magnets in there. You just like click, click. You're like, ooh, yeah, every time 20, every time 20. I had 100-sided die growing up, which is and it's like it's a ball. It's basically just a ball. Like you have to like really wait for it to stop. You can't like roll it too hard. You just have to like kind of like just like release it onto the table a little bit and like see where it ends up. Because like you roll it hard, it just like goes right off, and never really quite stops. And you're like, everybody sits down with like their magnifying glass and like, which side did it stop on? Which is perfectly at the top, because the 100 sides is just way too much.
Yes.
But yeah, Morgan, my advice is yes, either fix the die, like make it work for you so that this is fixed, or just play pretend and do the best of your ability.
Yeah, Maureen, you could always act like you were critically failing the entire time while taking great photos. So maybe you
Yes,
just trip a bunch during the photo session, pretend
we've
like you
all
drop your
seen.
camera.
Yeah, we have all seen the Instagram or Facebook videos of the people who are just like act like all crazy, whatever. Dude, be that guy, become that person, but take great photos. That's my.
Yeah, just do a few photos where you're like, I'm gonna run and jump past you and take a photo on the way, but then the
Exactly.
rest do really good.
Yes. Yeah, like save it. Like I would even maybe save that for the end. Like you're trying, like, oh yeah, and get the good photos, and then like, woo, I'm blowing past you, and then like throw in a few that are completely out of focus because they'll get it if you rolled a 1.
All right.
Throw in a few pictures that are like completely blurry, like it's bokeh, just bokeh photo.
uh, Callie from a random Facebook group says, I shoot a lot of weddings where marijuana is a central theme. When it became legal in
Mm,
Michigan, I kind of went hard after the market, and it's been real good for me. In the
I'm
past, my
sure.
couples would always ask me if I wanted a hit. I kind of got used to it.
Mm.
Now, with COVID, that doesn't happen anymore. And I feel like my work is suffering. I don't know if you can hear my daughter crying in the background. I'm rolling a critical failure on parenting right now. Uh, she's going to get it
No, I
together.
can't. It's
My
but
wife's up there.
just keep.
So Callie continues and says, I'm thinking about bringing. Oh, wait, sorry. Now with COVID, it doesn't happen anymore, and I feel like my work is suffering. I'm thinking about bringing my own weed to weddings, but wondering if that could get me in trouble in case a client wasn't okay with me smoking. Would it be okay to bring up at consults, or does that reflect poorly on me? And then Callie updates it to say, my work's quality isn't suffering. My photos are still great. I just don't enjoy shooting weddings as much now.
I've got so much to unwrap here. Like, there's a lot. There's a lot to unwrap when it comes to this. Callie, what I have to say, what I have to say is twofold. It's not that like you may be in a position where you're in one of those time periods of your life, and especially because of COVID, where you're just feeling a little down, and maybe that's why you feel like you're not enjoying shooting weddings as much. Um, it happens. Like there are times when you just like in your life and stress and things like that. Again, it's a very special episode of the Nerdy Photographer. Um, you just might be feeling down, and that's maybe why you're not enjoying shooting the weddings as much right now. It might not be that you're not high. That being said, I wouldn't bring my own weed to smoke at a wedding. This is something that you feel that you need to have. Edibles, I think, would be the way to go. Like, I don't know about
Ooh,
anybody else.
edibles?
Yeah, come on. It's Michigan. I'm from
It
Michigan
is.
originally, and like, I have relatives who actually work in dispensaries.
Mhm.
Um, and edibles are a thing. It's generally less of a high. It's just sort of more of a buzz. And my thought would be like, unless somebody is like absolutely like bringing it up that they are having weed as a theme
Mhm.
for their wedding, I wouldn't bring it up because that could seem unprofessional. That's just my immediate thought. But if they are and you want to partake, but during COVID you cannot like share an apparatus for partaking in cannabis, THC, whatever it is, like then I would suggest considering the edible route. That's just my professional opinion.
Callie, microdose on those edibles. You don't want to get knocked on your ass.
Right. Yeah. Spread them out. Spread them out. You don't want to. You don't want to like don't take too much at once. It's not a good idea.
I like to think of it as like if you went into a client meeting and you had to ask them if it was okay for you to bring, I don't know, a flask full of vodka to their wedding. Like, how would that reflect on your business? Like,
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is that they're like, as experienced wedding photographers, most of the time, if you have a flask with you, like on the day and haven't brought it up, the groomsmen are going to be totally happy with you, because it's just that's like, I'm not drinking it. It's more about like I bring a flask for them
Mhm.
in case they need something. But yeah, like if you feel that you need to bring this up at a meeting, like you might need to bring it up at another sort of meeting.
Might be time to bump the brakes a little bit.
Yeah, it
Just take a
might
break, you know?
you might maybe withdrawals. Maybe that's why you're feeling not so good on the weddings right now.
Ari from a random Facebook group says, I got a TARDIS wrap for my EOS R6. My boss said
Sweet.
he doesn't think it looks professional and wants me to get a new
Mm.
professional camera to replace it as soon as possible. So I bought another R6, but I really want to get this one wrapped too. What kind of wrap could I get that would still be professional, but also bring some joy to my life? I would consider anything Doctor Who, Star Trek, Battlestar Galactica, Babylon 5, Stargate, or Farscape related. No Star Wars, please.
Adamant no
Oh,
Star Wars.
oh
Adamant no
man.
Star Wars. So Ari, you've immediately gotten a negative check from me for like adamantly no Star Wars. If you're so into everything else, but like no Star Wars, um, because I feel like what you're saying here is like, oh, I gotta have like embrace my nerdism while I'm working, and like if you're working for somebody else, I get why they're a little concerned, but like, oh, it might look unprofessional, whatever. There, I think, are a lot of options out there. You, Ari, and then for some reason, I went to high school with a guy named Ari who was a total nerd. So I'm sort of picturing him in my head. Um,
Is Ari another just
you,
like
Ari,
name
have
you
to be
give
the
yourself?
No, 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 no,
Is
no.
that what you called yourself in high school?
Ari was no. Ari was actually the guy who created a Dune. We created this was before EDM was really a thing.
Hmm.
But we created like around the David Lynch movie Dune. We created like a dance track It was like
Nice.
with like using like clips from the movie Dune. It's
Yeah.
like, tell me of your homeworld, Usul. Like, you know, like, Wadib. Yeah. Yeah. So Ari, I would say you have to be the arbiter of whether something is professional looking. And I'm sure there are many, many very nerdy wraps for your EOS R6 that are out there that don't draw attention to themselves. And I think that this is probably what your boss is saying. Like, this really draws attention to itself, whatever your other wrap was. And like, look at the other wraps like that are in whatever your non-Star Wars related nerd thing has to be. Just because you can't do a Star Wars thing, that's fine, okay. But I'm sure there's something out there, Battlestar Galactica or Star Trek or Babylon 5, or Spaced, maybe Spaced, who knows?
Yeah.
There are things out there, that you can find that just don't that you will derive enjoyment from, that will not attract attention from your clients or from the people that you're working with. I think that's what your boss is probably talking about.
Yeah, when he said no Star Wars, it's like, man, Darth Vader or Kylo Ren would have been great, like black,
Exactly.
just like that
Black,
would have
just
been a super
simple,
professional look. Yeah.
or a Death Star, like a Death Star
Yeah.
sort of thing. Yeah, like I think that would have worked. But like as soon as he took that option away from me, I was like, don't know what I can do for you here, buddy.
Just as
Sorry,
long as he stayed away from like a C3PO, he's probably good.
yeah, as long as it's not like bronze, not gonna be good.
All right, here's the last one. Sam from a random Facebook group. I buy and sell used camera gear and Star Wars figurines. I use Venmo to do all my transactions. I have a client who buys a lot of figurines and old camera gear, but it's become a headache. Every time he buys a Star Wars figurine, he uses the eggplant and water drop emoji in the it's that's like the message box or memo, like the reason why you're buying it.
Yeah, it's the memo
And
box.
every
Yeah.
time he buys camera gear, he uses a peach and water drop emoji. I've had a few friends tell me that it looks like I'm paying for sex whenever they see one of these pop up on Venmo. I can't
Oh,
make my transactions private because then it looks like I'm up to something shady and no one will buy from me anymore. So, how can I get this guy to stop using gross emoji?
okay. I call bullshit on this for one reason. Sam. Um, yes, you cannot make all of your transactions private, but you can certainly make your transactions with this one person private. And if this person has a history of doing this, they're fucking with you. First of all, they're doing this because they absolutely know that it looks like you're paying for sex when they leave those emojis. So you just turn off that person. That person no longer gets public transaction memo status. Everybody else. And if you're not dealing with enough people apart from this dude, I think that this person, like, there's another issue we got to talk about. Like, if this is the only person that you're talking to, and they are putting the, eggplant and peach emojis, they're like, it's because they know that they're the only people that you're dealing with. I mean, it seems like a very this is like super up my alley as far as like Star Wars figurines and camera gear. It's like like how much crossover does this guy have between the Star Wars figurines and camera equipment? Like they can't be that much. It's like it's one or the other. Is this guy just outbidding everyone else? Like I
I'm
don't know. Like
guessing
it's
I'm guessing it's got to be more of the Star Wars figurines transactions, right? Old
yes, it
camera gear
has
is
to
going to be
be.
so expensive.
Yeah,
So
like
expensive.
well, Star Wars figurines depends. Like then we get into the whole like, is it still in the packaging? Is it like
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Is
what
it Leia
condition
in the
is it
white
in?
dress
But like
still in the
yeah, there's
packaging
a
from the
lot
first
of
issue? Yeah.
that's a you're gonna get pricey. The price is gonna go up from there. But it's yeah, I think this is dear Sam. This is a problem you have with one specific person, and if you have no other customers, then you have nothing to worry about. Uh, and,
Also,
you
dear
can
Sam,
just put
please
this person
send
to
me
private.
your gallery of Star Wars
Link.
figurines and camera gear that
Yeah,
you're selling.
exactly.
I would love to get in on this.
Yes, I am really curious about where the Star Wars figurines are and what condition they're in. because I might need to add to my collection. Not that I'm the guy who's already sending you the eggplant emojis. Um,
Casey, is it
I'm
you?
more of a no. I'm more of a Funko Pop guy. Um,
Yeah.
I had this whole thought in my head that I was going to do some Funko Pop photography during
Mhm.
the lockdown. I ordered a bunch, but I
Yeah.
haven't taken any pictures of them yet. I've got all the Ghostbusters, the original Ghostbusters. I was going to do a whole
Ooh.
like Ghostbusters thing. I bought a fog machine and everything because I'm into practical effects. I don't do
Yeah.
overlays. Um, I've got everybody. And like Winston was actually the hardest one to find.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, and speaking, going back to our Tombstone reference, I've got Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp.
No way.
I
That's
was gonna
awesome.
do some some Tombstone uh, Funko photos. I've also got like characters from Caddyshack, um, and a
I
lot
did not
of
realize Funko was so many different things that they had done.
oh my God, Steve, there's so many.
Mhm.
There's for everything, and then there are some of them that are like super like coveted and hard to find. Like I'm a big fan of the Big Lebowski,
Mhm.
and I've been trying to find a Big Lebowski Funko. They're hard to find, and they're also like $150.
Oh.
Yeah, and also Jack Burton from Big Trouble in Little China.
Yeah.
Same
Yeah.
thing. It's impossible to find one, but they're also like the ones that I do find are like all 120 to $170. It's like I'm not gonna spend that much money on this. It's ridiculous. This is a fun little thing. Like, but there are people out there. There are a lot of. I have an overlap of nerds on my podcast for some reason, um, like other nerdy podcasts, and these guys are like super into collecting this stuff, and like they have like showcases of their like Funkos,
Whoa.
and these guys were like, there's like 100 of them, and like I've got like maybe 20. I'm not like super into collecting them, but they're like, I gotta get a new one, and it's just like they have like different versions of like the same character, and I'm like, man, you're like you're really into this. You're like you've gone a step beyond.
I mean, if they become worth more as you hold on to them, like Star Wars figurines that are still in the box,
Uh,
then
yeah, I don't know. I have no idea whether there's going to be a market for these in years to come because it's I grew up in the prime of collecting.
mhm.
Like, it was sort of when like in the 90s, yeah, in the 80s and 90s where people were like, oh yeah, remember how people from the 40s and 50s and 60s like just threw out their baseball cards? Now they're worth so much money. You got to collect baseball cards, or you got to collect football cards, or you got to collect this thing, or whatever. It's going to be worth money someday. Well, then everybody collected them and didn't throw them away, and now they're not worth anything
Because
because the
everyone
whole
still has
point
them.
was right. The whole point was people threw them away, or you played with them and destroyed it, whatever the toy was, or whatever. Like they destroyed the original GI Joes with the Kung Fu grip.
Yeah.
Those things got destroyed because people were using them. And my dad would always talk about Mickey Mantle rookie cards that he had.
Mhm.
He just had like a box full. How much are those worth now? This is back in the 80s. And I was like, yeah, it's worth like $60,000, Dad. And he was like, oh man, I had like 4 of those. And his mom just threw them in a fire, like after he had moved out of the house because he just had like a box full of baseball cards that he had left at my grandparents' house. And I was just like, oh, I'm not going to tell you how much they're worth now. Like, it's just those sort of things but that's why they're worth money. That is why they
My
are worth money because there are
yeah.
supply and demand.
My brother-in-law, he had like an uncle who was big into collectibles and would buy them basketball cards every single year. And like with the
Okay.
pandemic going on, apparently basketball cards have become very valuable, the older ones. So one of the basketball cards he bought for my brother-in-law's younger brother was Michael Jordan's rookie card. And
Oof. Yeah.
I don't know who it was from, which company it was from, but it's worth $1,500 now. And my brother-in-law's
Yeah.
like,
I mean, like,
yeah, my little brother's looking all over for that card.
it's crazy because like and it's weird to see what things affect like the prices of them because like it's not only like you can sit on something like I had like Mark McGuire and Jose Canseco rookie cards
Mhm.
because back in the 80s like they were Bash Brothers, whatever. It's like, they hit a lot of home runs. And they had their rookie cards were worth a lot of money. But then it's like the steroid scandal happened, and like the price of those cards like went way down. So like there are a lot of things
But
that can affect.
then the Lonely Island music video
Yes.
/ whatever came out, and now they're worth something again. Is that how it works?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe, possibly. I haven't checked. It's entirely possible that Andy Samberg has increased the value of my old baseball cards, like the
That'd be
Mark McGuire.
fantastic.
Yeah, I would have to owe Andy Samberg a letter, a thank you letter. Not sure I'm prepared to write that.
Well, I think that's going to do it for us this week on the Wedding Photo Hangover podcast. Casey, where can people find you online?
People can find the Nerdy Photographer podcast wherever they get podcasts. Just type in Nerdy Photographer podcast. They can find me online at nerdyphotographer.com. You can find me on Instagram and the Twitters and Reddit at the Nerdy Photo. No spaces, no dots, no anything, just the Nerdy Photo. And on Facebook / Nerdy Photographer.
Nice.
And that's it.
Awesome.
That's where you find me.
Cool.
And you can find me, like if you want to look at my work, at
you have a great
Casey F
website.
Photo.
Yeah.
At Casey F Photo for the Instagram and the Twitter, and Casey Fatchett on Facebook. And Fatchett.com for my wedding stuff. If you're actually interested, if you listen this long and you're interested in seeing my wedding work, Fatchett.com is where you can find my wedding work. I've been doing this for 20 years. So
yeah, you have like a stat counter on your website that's like, I've got 20 plus years of experience, shot over 600 weddings. What my favorite thing was I shoot 90,000 plus photos a year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that maybe need to adjust that for COVID, like that COVID year, like things certainly dropped. But yeah, I need to adjust that. Like it's probably like 700 weddings, over 700 weddings now. But yeah, it's just it's sort of like I felt like I have been doing this for a very long time. And when I started out, I was doing like, I'll take any wedding I can, like and did a lot of like 50 plus a year weddings, and then I said, no, it's not good. Not good for life. Not good for me personally. Not good business choice. So then I went down, but still, it's been a lot of weddings.
Yeah.
Been a lot of photos.
One of your recent episodes, you guys, you were talking to a photographer from Michigan, and you guys were talking about photographers having heart attacks and stuff like that, and it was a little bit frightening. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a panic attack a few years ago. He was talking about a photographer that he knew who had a heart attack. That would be Rob Hall. He's very kind of a famous YouTuber, somewhat in the photography world. He does a lot of photo equipment stuff. We're actually we're recording this tomorrow. As we got another part 2 of that interview. But yeah, there's people working themselves to death is a really it's a little, you can do it. You can manage to do it. Like it's you don't have to try too hard. All you have to do is just say yes to everybody. It's not a good thing.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for joining me, and I'll let you go now.
Thank you for having me on. Enjoy, everyone.
Wedding Photo Hangover was edited this week by Steve Van Elk.